Hey guys, Tom itself here, and it's time we had a little chat about Battlefield. I'm trying to introduce my friend Tots here to the game, try and have a little fun. Now, I don't want to sound overly negative. I want this to be constructive criticism, because that's how we improve. We maybe it seems a little harsh at times, but it's in good faith trying to help make a better game. I don't want you to think of me as saying this just because I happen to play a fair amount of Call of Duty, or because I've played Homefront or Halo. Those are my other experiences with FPS games. Lock-on launcher isn't going to work there, is it? But, and I try to rationalize this myself, come at it from as many different directions as I can, and I keep coming to the same conclusion. And it's fairly simple, and I think a lot of people, it was a jet that took out the tank there if you were kind of confused. A lot of people come to a similar conclusion. They really haven't talked a whole lot about why. And what you'll hear them say is that Battlefield is best played on the PC. And for a subset of the game types and maps, that is certainly true. And so I'm trying to rationalize that, think about why that is, and what might change to make that better, or where Battlefield kind of went wrong on the console. And it's its own game, it has its own way of doing things, and you shouldn't try to make it like another game just because those other games are successful. And not fail to stop this plant here. This is, oh god, terrible. I need to practice more. So the general issue is that it doesn't feel like the larger maps, the larger game modes work with only 24 players. I find it kind of funny that a lot of PC players talk about using controllers when they use vehicles, but at the same time, console players are like, oh, vehicles? We don't like vehicles, give us infantry combat. It seems such an odd thing to say. I got killed by the jet myself. And the generic complaint that you hear from the console community with only 24 players is that these larger maps, these larger game modes, especially Conquest, are simply too slow. And that's one of the reasons I chose this game. It's a first base stop by the defense, but it takes 24 minutes to get those 75 kills. And I think there are 10 or 11 of us on the team. So 75 kills in 24 minutes split between 10 players. It's freaking slow. And not just the kind of, I'm not having my brain tickled constantly by shooting my gun. It's honestly painfully slow because you sit around waiting for things to happen and you don't know what to do. One complaint that we're always going to hear is that people aren't playing the objective enough. That they aren't charging in there, or at least making enough of an effort to push in to do whatever it is the game mode demands that you try to do. And to some extent, yes, that is a problem. We do have recon snipers way off in the hills trying to pick people off, and they do get a few kills, actually. It's mostly just because we're running around without anything to do. But at the same time, I'm not entirely sure what their options are for pushing in with armor, because we're doing... Okay, I'm not helping out because I got a lock-on launcher at the moment, but somehow my team is managing to take out the enemy tanks, so they're having a hard time pushing up. But I've just said that I'm not contributing to taking out the ground vehicles, so I'm a little surprised that we don't have tanks up in our face that I can't do anything about. Now, I am an engineer, but I've got a lock-on launcher because I'm worried about helicopters and jets. And in fact, the one guy on their team who does really well is the guy flying around in a jet, taking out our vehicles and picking off infantry occasionally. And we can't do anything about him. I think I talked about this earlier, but if I get a lock on, he pops flares, he flies away, he's not coming back until his flares have come back, and I'm not going to be able to do anything to stop him. Just might as well stop trying to lock on, because otherwise this turns into a game of follow the jet around and not get to do anything. Who wants to sit there and listen for the beeping sound for 20 minutes? Not I, not I. But I think I've hit on one of the reasons why this game is so incredibly slow. He's up there doing great, taking out our vehicles. I'm trying to stop him, but neither of us are really directly involved with the objective. He's not going to come down and plant it. I'm having a hard time paying attention to anything else when I got the launcher up, trying to listen for the beeps and follow him around. And every time I have to kind of walk out into the open to try and get a line of sight on him to lock on, I end up somewhere I really wouldn't want to be in perspective to an infantry fight. So we're having this game, kind of this fight on our own, that isn't really directly connected to the objective. I mean, we're trying to fight for our vehicles so that it makes it harder for them to bring their vehicles in and infantry in and arm the objective. neither of us is looking to stop people from getting to the objective or kill the people who are right there defending it. Okay, yeah, he's kind of a nuisance in that jet. He obviously knows what he's doing, and he does pick up quite a few infantry kills, but hopefully jets... You would hope jets wouldn't be that great against infantry, although this gameplay kind of indicates otherwise. So there, I changed up my class. I was like, forget trying to shoot that down. If I can get a lucky RPG on him, great. Otherwise, I need to worry about tanks. And I'm not even going to have vehicles of my own. He's been taking them out. So I'm going to just put some mines down and get some RPGs and just hope that he isn't too much of a pain. And maybe I'll take a couple pot shots at him with the RPG if I get a chance, you know. I just might get lucky and send him back to his base where he can wait a couple minutes before he gets another jet. Or there might even be one there, who knows. I'm not sure what the respawns are, to be honest. So this vehicle on view gameplay, there's a lot of that. Vehicles trying to fight other vehicles, vehicles trying to control certain areas of the map, or say airspace. But I feel like a lot of the vehicle combat doesn't really make sense to me because I still don't have all the vehicle unlocks. I've got quite a ways to go on many of them. And without being able to try them, I don't really understand how they fit into the game. So it's an area of the game that I just don't completely understand and have a hard time trying to figure out what's supposed to be going on and how it's supposed to work. With that said though, I'm still going to stick with my previous observation that people in vehicles are less about playing the objective. Okay, your tanks and ground vehicles can get on the points in Conquest, and they can definitely help control the area, but the drivers, they're probably best not getting out. And especially air vehicles. Helicopters, I guess you can... kind of risky, but you can land on a point in Conquest. Jets, no. Your job is other vehicles, strictly. So with more people in vehicles, that leaves fewer targets for infantry, unless you want to go engineer and take out an appropriate weapon. The appropriate weapons being the standard launchers, the SMAW and the RPG, the lock-on launchers, the Stinger or the IGLA, or there's the Javelin too, if you want to do something a little different. And I guess if you can get someone with a SOFLAM, it's the only laser designator I have. Don't know if there are any more. Again, more stuff I still haven't unlocked, I'm guessing. If you get that, then yeah, you can use the Javelin on air vehicles, but it always feels like the vehicles figure out where the helicopter jet figures out where that SOFLAM is and then flies around on the other side of the building you put it up on or whatever. And whoever's controlling that is just trying to follow that one other person around the map, or I guess if you've got more people in a helicopter. And so it ends up taking quite a few people to try to take out an air vehicle, or not necessarily as many to take out a tank or whatnot, but if you're infantry, it's kind of risky to take on a tank. And so instead here, the question becomes more about focus fire. How many people does it take to take out a vehicle? And the number changes based on when you consider how long you want it to take. If you've got lots of people all shooting RPGs at a tank, if you get enough RPGs in one volley, tank's gone. But your air vehicles have flares, and it takes too long to reload your lock-on launcher, and so especially if they fly away, that's the other big thing. And if they pop flares, you have to reload, and they can do something about it. So you almost need one person just dedicated to getting rid of the flares, and so you need a certain amount of focus fire to take out a lot of air support, especially, and it really helps against ground vehicles. Trying to get lucky. Well, can you blame me, really? And so the question becomes, how many people have appropriate launchers to do that job? But how many people are engineers? If each squad, and there are only 3, only has one engineer, then you've only got 3 launchers. And okay, you could have one of each different kind, but that's still going to be pretty hard to focus fire down on a vehicle when you're trying to spread out over the entire map. And that's why on vehicle-heavy maps you see engineer run. My squad is very odd at the moment. I would normally have 2 to 4 engineers in my squad on this map, just because you need to take out vehicles in order to stop their push. And on the other team, you need to take out the vehicles who are defending. It's not... Maybe if you get in there and start spawning in around there, the vehicles are less useful. But especially defending, or just in general on Conquest, I feel like almost everyone has to be an engineer because whenever you see a vehicle, you want to try to bring it down. And I guess that's really where my experience in Halo, Homefront, and Call of Duty comes through, is you see a vehicle and you go, oh, that's worth something to the enemies. That could do a lot of damage, and for them, it could be really useful in winning the game. And so I need to do whatever I can to try to get rid of that vehicle. So yeah, I go after it. I run around trying to shoot RPGs up in the air at a jet that's flying around that I have minimal chance of hitting, just because if I do get that, it's worth it, because that jet is a major nuisance to my team. But let's get back to this focus fire idea. It's one of the big reasons why these game modes are slow, because it takes a bunch of people, or if you have to do it on your own, it may turn out to be nearly impossible, in the case of me trying to shoot down that damn jet, to get vehicles out of the way to keep the game going. It takes a concerted effort for an extended period of time that drags the game out. And okay, I've got teammates who are being extremely defensive back here. I'm trying to get ammo from this guy. What's going on? And I think there's an ammo pack somewhere, so yeah, there it is. And I've got ammo again, but these guys are being really defensive and just waiting for the enemies to come to them, but at the same time, they're staying out of the way of that damn jet that we don't seem to be able to do anything about. And the needing a bunch of engineers or vehicles on your team in order to do something about the enemy vehicles, otherwise you just try to drag the game out so that you can wear the enemy down, is what leads to really slow games in these 24-player servers. It's not that the game is inherently painfully slow with only 24 players, it's that the roles get divided up and actually getting things done becomes so difficult for a single person that the game really does end up being very slow. Wait a minute, I just said doing things solo in Battlefield, a game that's all about teamwork. Well, yes, and partly because it's one specific role that you're trying to fill, but at the same time you need several people to do it. Look at all those orange dots out there in the area we can't go, just sniping at us, I'm guessing. So, say you've got a recon. Well, your recon hopefully has a SOFLAM if he's going to help you deal with vehicles. Or you've got support. Well, if you've got someone running support, I find javelin ammunition to be, you go through it really fast if you're doing things right. And so you'll need a support player to help out the engineer with a javelin. Otherwise, with the explosives proficiency, it's not quite as big a deal. But in the end, getting enough people to do that one specific role, to team up on a vehicle, it's really hard to find enough people who can fill the role that will be able to take on that particular vehicle. Unless you have absolutely, 6 to 8 engineers on your team. And in that case, I think it points to some poor game balance. Whereas in 32 or 64 player servers, you've got a lot more engineers, and especially vehicles up in the air, all of those people can lock on, and so it becomes much, much easier to focus fire down on a vehicle. Now, I'm just saying, I've never played on the PC, I've never played in a 64 player server, but I can reasonably imagine what that would look like. Now, I don't want to fault DICE too much. They seem to be very interested in having their sandbox game play well, and it does play fairly well. It's just that as you change the number of players in the server, things don't scale the way the game mechanics kind of dictate that they should, and that is, you probably have longer to regen your flares, or less vehicle health, the fewer players there are, because that vehicle becomes more powerful. The player up in the vehicle becomes more powerful. But at the same thing, things like jets, where you can't actually play the objective at all, where you can't serve as transport. Transport helicopters are awesome for trying to get past a solid defense, get behind their lines and mess things up, so I can't be too hard on helicopters. But especially jets, why you basically take one player out of the main game of trying to play the objective and just put them in a very specific role when you don't have a whole lot of players to work with seems to be kind of sketchy to me. I don't really want to make a whole bunch of negative speculations about the heavy metal DLC that's coming out in several months, the vehicle heavy stuff. But at the same time, I have to wonder, what classes are we going to play in that DLC? Well, probably engineer, because it's going to be one of the few practical classes. Yeah, you could argue for support and recon for SOFLAM, but do you see a place for the assault medic class? I don't. I have a hard time justifying that, at least in my experience. So the idea that a balanced squad, that you have one of each of the different classes in your squad, might not be the best way to go, or might not make a whole lot of sense. It seems kind of odd to me. Right now, a lot of the time I just see 4 engineers on my team, in my squad, I mean, and I kind of wonder, like, is that really intentional, or is something going on here that DICE didn't really intend? Especially because it's hard to get communication between the squads. I've basically given up on trying to have more than myself and 3 friends in a game at any one time, just because it gets to be such a pain. So I don't know, maybe if you can communicate between the different squads, say, hey, what's your engineer doing? Does your recon have a SoFlame or not? I don't know. The other thing about the Heavy Metal DLC is I would kind of hope that they would include the vehicle shortcut with that DLC, just because it'd be so painful for anyone going into that without the vehicle unlocks, because they're quite powerful and rather important. So if you went in there without a lot of the stuff, it could be really, I don't know, it doesn't sound so fun to me. That's just my thought there. Part of me wonders just what Heavy Metal DLC is going to do that's going to make it more vehicle heavy than the current large maps, where it feels like there are more seats and vehicles than players in the game a lot of the time. What can you do? And it feels like everyone is focused on either getting in a vehicle, repairing a vehicle, destroying other vehicles. And if you're infantry, well, good luck, because you're going to be running a long way, and you're going to probably get just taken out by another vehicle when you really can't do a whole lot to stop it, unless you happen to get a lucky launcher shot into it. But the conclusion that I've come to is that 24-player Battlefield isn't slow simply because there aren't a lot of people on the map. It's slow because those players get divided between so many different roles and sub-roles. Tank driver, tank gunner, trying to SoFlam, trying to map, trying to serve as long-range recon with a jet pilot, that getting anything done at some points can be a real challenge, especially when it takes more than one person to do any specific job, namely taking out especially air vehicles with flares. You can't do it on your own for the most part, and with the trouble of communicating between squads, and otherwise you need multiple people doing the same role on your own squad, I think it quite turns into a confusing situation where you don't really know what to do. God damn, Jet killed me again, damn it! For example, how many support players do you really want on your team? You probably don't need 1 per squad. I have a hard time seeing that, at least in my experience. If you've got 1, you're probably good. Maybe 2, but on these vehicle heavy maps, unless you're running Javelin, I don't see a real need to have more than one support player on your team. And so you're trying to and it becomes the difference between squad balance and team balance, and Battlefield really doesn't offer a good way to control or communicate with your entire team, because it gets too confusing. I've tried to be in a party before with 2 squads in the same party, and hopefully you still end up on the same team. And I hate teammates who sit way back here and gotta run all the way. Why are you here? And I think I specifically tell my friend, do not spawn in on that guy. He is in the boonies. You don't want to have to make that run. It'd probably be faster just to suicide myself instead of... But it doesn't matter because the game is so slow. My team is stopping their vehicles from getting up, but their jet can't dislodge the defenders. I mean, at least it can't do that, because the guy is a pain in the ass. Even though he can't come down and actually do anything about the objective, he is making life quite difficult for us. So I guess part of my conclusion is that if you have an objective, you need to very much limit the number of players who can be in roles that can't be looking for the objective. So the guys in jets, the guys with lock-on launchers just staring up the sky, looking around and offering easy shots to the recon snipers off in the hills. You have to limit the number of people doing that, because it's fewer people playing the objective and it's less action for everyone else. The simplest way I have to summarize that is to say that the number of seats in vehicles that aren't explicitly for transport needs to be very limited. So the Amtrak is awesome. The Jeeps are great. transport helicopter, it could kind of tear things up. I don't know. The light armored vehicles, maybe not. Well, yeah, it's open to tweaking. But once the infantry gets where it's going, it largely has to become an infantry battle. Otherwise, the guys who are otherwise stuck as infantry kind of end up just hiding behind corners, and it slows the game down even more. So the other direction I've been coming at this from is that it needs to not take several players in very specific classes, specifically and especially lock-on launchers for air vehicles as engineer, in order to get the job done. Because you've already subdivided your team, and only a portion of them are engineers, and only a portion of them are going to have the right launcher to deal with the situation. So the fewer players you have, probably the longer it should take to regenerate flares, or the more damage a launcher should do. And I know that's kind of odd for a sandbox game to change the game mechanics, the dynamics of the game, based on something like the number of players in the server, but as far as game balance goes, it makes perfect sense. Think about how they tried to adjust the lock-on launcher balance in the most recent patch. They reduced the range at which it could lock on to air vehicles, and that effectively made it harder to focus fire down from around the map. At the same time, they made the lock-on time shorter. You don't have to try to get a lock-on from really far away before you fire. But at the same time, it didn't really change the effectiveness of any individual player. At least to my estimation. I don't know. It's more about repair rate when you're trying to shoot down helicopters with engineers repairing them. Yeah. I don't really see a whole lot of other options that really fit with the theme of Battlefield. You could make the Javelin awesome to the point of making the other launchers useless, except for killing infantry. Let's kill some infantry with that launcher. Or to take away flares, essentially, unless there are a minimum number of players in the game mode. I don't know, I don't really like either of those ideas. I think it takes a lot away from the character Battlefield. What's clear to me is that it's not just that there aren't enough players here, or at least as many players as the maps are designed for, is that there aren't enough players to fill all the roles that the developers intended when they made this game. And so, despite the fact that controlling a vehicle with a controller is more enjoyable and better than controlling infantry, especially compared to mouse and keyboard, console players would rather have infantry combat than this situation where you don't have enough people to fill all the roles when you get all the vehicles going in a lot of these game modes. I don't know, you can call me a Battlefield noob. I kind of would rather play on the PC, but hey, my friends are on Xbox, and I'd rather play with friends no matter what the situation. And wow, that is going to be a 23-minute commentary. I guess it's a good thing I chose the long gameplay. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for watching my long, rambly commentary, but I tried to think about this quite a while, and this is really the conclusion I came to. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.